Hey everyone, Wayne here. Today we're going to do a let's play or playthrough of Interceptor Ace. In Interceptor Ace, you pilot a German interceptor, trying to intercept the daylight bombing raids over Nazi-occupied Europe. You are playing as a German fighter, German interceptor they call it, and you're either going to fight against Allied fighters or bombers, or possibly both, depending on the month and depending on what you roll when you're conducting a sortie. How the game works, if you're familiar with any of the Night Fighter Ace or any of Gregory Smith's kind of narrative-driven games, you're going to be semi-familiar with how it works. But for those who aren't, we'll kind of explain. You're piloting an individual aircraft, so you're going to have your own sheet with your own guy, which I have it all ready to go. We are Carl von Stahl. He will be piloting, and I rolled on the list in the rulebook. It was randomly chosen. We're going to be piloting a Focke-Wulf 190 A4. And you can see it starts in March of 1943. And if we make it that far, which the game is a little deadly, it goes all the way to February 1944. Today we'll probably just cover at least one sortie. What you have is you have your fighter. You're going to have your fighter sheet you can see in the bottom left. There's a whole bunch of them for the game that come with the game, which is really cool. There's a whole bunch of different variety, both of the Focke-Wulf 190 and then also different aircraft as well. I have the bomber chart set out here. I have my pilot sheet here, so you can keep track of his experience points, prestige points, his rank, his skills he's earned and bought. Up here is the operations map. You can't see all of it because I want to focus on these are the two that'll really be key to the game here. But up here in the operations map really kind of just shows you a couple of charts and tables. There's a thing for the weather up here in the top left. I know you can't see it. I'll show it to you in a second here. And then there is the cards as well. So there's combat cards. So you do roll dice for a lot of things. However, when you are doing combat, you are using the cards. You're going to flip the cards, and they're going to tell you based on your firepower how many hits, what happens with the hit, and then looking at defensive fire, and then possibly looking at defense if you're in a dogfight. I'll explain more of that as we get to it. The weather, let me show you. I'll take the camera off the mount here, so bear with me a second, so you can see a better idea of everything. So as we play here, we're going to have the fighter map right here. On the fighter mat, my interceptor mat, I should say. Because again, with the Germans, they call it the Interceptor. I'm an Interceptor Ace, well, hopefully. We're going to be what base I'm at, which I'm at a French base. And this was all randomly assigned when I rolled. It determined my aircraft and determined that I'm going to be stationed in France at Poi, at the airfield, and it's part of 2 JG2 unit. I do have to apologize. Let me take a second to do my usual disclaimer. First of all, I'm probably going to butcher some of these names with pronunciations. I apologize in advance. American from the Midwest. I have never been to France, never been to Europe, period. A lot of these names are foreign to me, quite literally. So maybe some pronunciation problems, but the spirit is there. I appreciate it, okay? And same thing I also want to mention is the rules. I may get a rule or two wrong. In fact, I'm probably quite likely to. That's okay. I don't get too offended if you point it out in the comments. You can certainly let me know. That way other people know as well. The key is we should have most of the rules down here, and you should be able to learn the game with reasonable accuracy after watching this. So, that said, here's the operations map. Again, it has some charts on here. I don't have to refer to them a whole lot. Either I know or I have some cheat sheets I've made up. The cards will be over here, which I'll as I draw each one, I'll put it on camera so you can see it. And then the weather's up here, just keeping track of. You can see it's a 2 to 10 is good, 11 is poor, 12 to bad. We roll on that. Really, the odds are you're going to have good weather, just because, as the designer explained, that's when the most likely chance that raids were going to be launched was when it was good weather. So now we have the bomber as well over here. I probably should have talk a little bit more about the fighter, but same thing as the fighter. There's going to be boxes for the components, for the actual, say, airframe, the wings, control surfaces, crew status, engines. And as the bomber takes damage, which we also have boxes, you can see over here on our fighter, on Interceptor, we have boxes as well. As we take damage, you're going to go ahead and put a damage marker there. You just put it right down on the spot. If it gets to the X or the flame, big trouble. Good for the bomber, or good if it gets on the bomber for us. Bad if it happens to us, then we're going to have to bail out and parachute to safety. The tracks here, so what happens is the endurance boxes here. Again, this is you should be very familiar with this if you played any of Gregory Smith's submarine games or Raiders of the Deep from Compass, which is not Gregory Smith's game, but is based on his system, or Untitled Ace, etc. You're going to see these endurance boxes. So you're going to start at one of these bases, which, as I pointed out, and you can see up here again, we're stationed in France. So I have our Focke-Wulf 190 right there. We're going to start off at our takeoff spot, and we're going to move along to wherever the bomber is, and then we're going to hopefully land successfully. All right, I don't want to spend forever explaining. Let's go ahead and dive right into the game, and I'll explain and teach as we go along. So again, this is March of 1943. This will be the first sortie of the month. We're going to start off at the very beginning. So what we do is we have our aircraft counter down here. You can see if you look in the bottom left on our aircraft mat, you can see he's in the hangar right now. Now remember, we're in France. So you go to the French base's takeoff endurance box. Go ahead and place him in there. He's ready to go. Now he's going to take off if there is a raid available for him to intercept. So what we do is we roll on this chart, and the game has a ton of charts. That's what these games do. So chart A1 is the raid chart. We're going to look at the month, March 1943. We're going to go ahead and roll a 2d6 on there and see what we get. Let's empty out these. Let's see. Can you guys see the rolls up there? Yeah, you can. All right, perfect. All right, so at the top of your screen, I'll have the actual dice tower. We got an 8. So what that means, we look at March 1943, look at 8, Amiens Rail in France, which we're in France, so luckily we're going to be able to intercept that one. So what we do is we go ahead and, first of all, just so I don't forget, we take our sortie log sheet. I'm going to write it. We're going to write our raid target, and then we're going to roll for, see if there's any aircraft, and we'll write that here. Let me go ahead and write that down. All right, so I have it written down there in the top corner. You can see we have it written down. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move the raid target counter to where the raid's going to be. It was Amiens Rail in France. So we have our raid target counter. I keep it on the bomber sheet right here. Go ahead and just place it on France, which, because we're based out of France, it's going to be the first endurance box. So that's really good for us. We're going to have a really good chance to intercept the raid for sure. So what we do from there is that we go ahead and determine the weather. Remember, I told you to roll a 2d6. 4. It's good weather. So place our little weather chit up on good. After that, we move our aircraft counter from the takeoff endurance box to the raid location endurance box. So because it is in France and we're within range, which if you look on my aircraft mat, you can see most of these boxes are blue. There's one row here of grayed out boxes. If the raid had been in one of those, so say we're launching in France, the gray box would be Bremen, which is in, I think it's in, is it the Netherlands? You know what? I'm not sure. But the point is, it's grayed out, so we would not be able to intercept it. Fortunately for us, it's in France, so it's right there. So go ahead and we take our interceptor takes off, and we go ahead and place him on the same box as the raid target. Now what we're going to do is we're going to roll to intercept. Look at charts again. So we have all of our charts here. You can see chart B1 is our interception chart. We're going to roll 2d6 on here, and depending on what we get, we're either going to intercept it, we're going to see a fighter encounter, etc. We go ahead and roll. Roll to 10. Spitfire encounter head on. Oh, man. Okay, so I'm going to cheat. We're not going to do a Spitfire encounter. I know. Give me crap in the comments. That's fine. I want to show you guys fighting a bomber, right? I want to see us going at a bomber. We go after a Spitfire. We're going to have to keep trying to go after the bombers later, and it's going to be a little difficult. So we're going to save that for another video. I know, why even roll it, right? Sorry. I'm just trying to teach you guys. So anyway, so we're going to pretend we just rolled a head on, which is basically the equivalent of an equal attack. So just to kind of explain, if you have a raid not located, obviously you're going to have to move along the endurance track and keep looking for it. P-47 fighters, Spitfire encounter, And either of those are going to be fighting those fighters, and then you're still going to have to move along the track later to look for the bombers. If you're head-on, it's just basically, like I said, one-on-one style of combat. You're not worried about positional advantage. Whereas if advantaged, out of the sun, or disadvantaged, it'll impact whether you get to shoot first or you don't get to shoot, if they get to shoot first. So like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to pretend we rolled, 4, 6, 7, 8, whatever. We're going to just do a head-on attack against something. Well, what are we gonna attack, you say? Well, no problem. What we do is we're going to roll on A3, which is the aircraft target chart, which we go ahead and look at the month. And now what we're looking at two things. One, we're going to see which bomber we're going to roll for. And two, we're going to see if there's a fighter escort. So this is different from that previous roll where, remember, we technically rolled Spitfire encounter. We're ignoring that. We're going on to fight a bomber. With a Spitfire encounter, it would just be the Spitfire, and then, like I said, we'd have to keep advancing along the endurance track to try to locate the actual bombers. Well, in this case, because we skipped that, we're going right to the bombers. We do look at fighters to see if those fighters, if there are any fighter coverage for those bombers. Now, at the beginning of the war here, the beginning of this part of the war, I should say, there's no fighter coverage at all. And then as you get, there's maybe coverage, none, maybe coverage, and then starting in August of 43, that's when you're going to start seeing P-47, and then different fighters, P-47, P-38, P-51, etc. Because we're in the first sortie, it's March of 43, there's no chance of any fighter coverage, so we don't have to worry about that at all. So we're just going to roll for the bombers here. We're going to roll a 10-sided. 1 through 7 is a B-17, 8 through 10 is a B-24. Get our 10-sided die here. Let's roll her up. Oop, sorry about the focus, everyone. Should autofocus in general. All right, a 1. So we got a B-17. Boom, B-17. So what I like to do, grab our B-17 counter over here. Got our bad boy. Place them over here on the bomber mat. And then what you do is you're looking at the range, what range you're coming in on. Depending on certain factors, you may come in differently. You may get an attack at rockets before long range. But in general, what you're doing, you're going to go ahead and take your range marker here, and you're going to place it on long range, because that's when you're going to come in when you're fighting a bomber. Not to get ahead of myself, but just to explain. So the bomber combat, each time you're coming in here and you're fighting, it's going to be called a pass. Each pass is made up of 3 rounds. So there's going to be the round at long range, a round at medium range, and a round at close range. And then if the bomber is still there, or you want to try to fight another one, regardless, you'll come back around and you start back at long range and you start fighting a bomber again. So in this case, we're starting at long range. We have no advantages in regards to being advantaged or coming out of the sun, which I explained to you guys a little bit, which was if we had rolled that, we may get a free attack on them, or they may get a free attack on us if disadvantaged. However, we're coming at long range, no worries about anything like that. It's just going to be regular combat, us fighting this bomber. All right, put the bomber on there. We know we're at long range. One other thing we're going to check is if you look over on the map over here, and this is where I'll kind of zoom in a little bit for you guys so you can see. You can see where we are. You can see on the endurance track, so remember France, and that's right where we are. You can see, if you look close, a little bomb symbol, and then over here you can see a flak symbol. What that means is the bomber, if they're intercepted in these boxes with the bomb symbol, they still have bombs in their payload, which means that if you get a hit on the bomb bay, it could set off the bombs, destroying the bomber. If you encounter them here, where there's the flak symbol, then that means they may have suffered flak damage and are going to have random hits already assigned to them. You would go ahead and roll on that and determine if they have that before you start combat. All right, so they have a bomber there's bombs in the payload. So if we hit the bomb bay, we may be able to destroy it that way. We'll see what happens. So here's how combat works. First of all, as the interceptor, we always choose an aim point to start. With every round, we choose an aim point. port wing, starboard wing, or airframe. This is used to determine the damage if we get a group damage result. I'll explain that as we go. In our case, we don't have an aim scale anyway, so our default is going to be the airframe. So go ahead and just aim at the airframe here. So we basically just call it we're aiming for the airframe. Again, there's a chart for that. When we get to it, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we're aiming at the airframe. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and flip our cards. Combat is resolved with cards. We're going to be flipping one for our guy, and then they're going to be flipping one as well. So what we're going to be doing, we've chosen where we're aiming at the airframe. We're going to fire, which I realize I don't have the ammo on there. Just looked at that, which is a little disconcerting, but then again, you know, it happens, right? So some of the guns have ammo and some have unlimited. So I apologize for not having the ammo markers on there. Rookie mistake. Maybe they forgot to load me up back at base. I'm gonna be mad. All right, so we're loaded up. So we got our ammo here, so you can see our weapons. Let me go ahead and zoom in. All right, so here's our weapons. When you fire, you have to fire with all your weapons that have ammo. You can't just say, oh, I don't want to fire with the forward guns. I don't want to save my cannons. Nothing like that. If you're firing with all your forward weapons, you have to fire all of them at once. Again, assuming you have ammo. You can see there's different guns. And then see this bold number next to the gun? So the forward guns has a 2. This cannon has a 4. This cannon has a 6. That's each weapon's firepower rating. That bold number is going to be added together to determine our firepower for our attack. In this case, we're shooting everything coming in hot. We're shooting all of our guns at once. So 6, 4, and 2. So we're going to have a 12 firepower. And all we do is our ammo. We have 6 on this cannon and only 2 on this cannon. Let's go ahead and flip it over. So that's down to a 1. And then one of these we'll go ahead and flip over. So he's down to 5 ammo. And then that way we are keeping track of our ammo as we are fighting. All right, so we're shooting with our 12 firepower. We're going to go ahead and draw a card, and we're going to look at the results. So we draw a combat card. We go ahead and look at this bad boy. And then all we do is we look over for a column that has 12 on it, which we can, or 12 or less, whatever's the closest without going over, which right here is 12 GP. That means group damage, and since we're aiming at the airframe, it'll be group damage from the airframe. Which, just like I was kind of explaining to you guys, you can either have a number of random hits, you can have group damage, or DE means the aircraft is destroyed. Now, combat is simultaneous, so we're also going to flip for the bomber as well. So we'll flip another card, and what we're looking at is at the bottom of the card, defensive hits. All right, defensive fire, 2 hits. So they're going to get 2 hits on us, barring any modifiers. Now you might be saying, Wayne, what modifiers are those? Well, I'll gladly explain that to you guys. So we modifiers based on range, aircraft type, gunners taking hits, which basically means that the gunners are wounded or dead, etc. One of the things you can do is you can look at down here on the bomber chart. Let's go ahead and zoom in. All right, you can see on our bomber chart here, we're at long range right now, as I told you earlier. So you can see us. So we're at long range. What you're doing, right now we're fighting a B-17. He's coming in formation, which means he is this guy right here, B-17 in formation. We are over here, we're the interceptor. So what that means is you look at the side where you are. So for us, we're the interceptor, so we have -1 random hit. Now, we didn't get only random hits, we got a group damage, but the group damage will have random hits involved. We'll just reduce them by 1 due to our long range. The B-17 has no modifiers for long range, but as you can see as we get closer to medium range, he'll have +1 random hit, and close range +2 random hits. That shows how deadly the box formation is that the B-17s flew in. All right, so our card we flipped over, remember we got a GP, which is group damage. Go ahead and look on our chart here, B3, bomber and group damage chart. And we're going to go ahead and look at the airframe. When you have an airframe hit, controls suffer 1 damage, airframe suffers 1 damage, the gunner takes a hit, and then there's 2 random hits. Now our modifiers for our range, at long range, we're -1 random hit. It's only modifier, so it's going to be 1 random hit in addition to these other ones here. So let's go ahead and mark those off on the actual bomber here. So the first one, actually, you know what? I can go ahead and do that off camera. All right, so I have a damage marker down on the airframe, one of the control surfaces, and then remember the gunner took a damage. You don't put a damage marker because it's basically one of the gunners on the B-17, so it's a person. So what you do is you put a number there. And what happens is next round, so when we get to medium range, whatever hits they have, assuming they have hits, are going to be reduced by whatever this number is. However, because combat is simultaneous for this first exchange of fire, it doesn't account. So what I like to do is just a mnemonic. I set it next to it. That way I look and say, oh, no modifiers. And then at the end of the round, boop, just move it over. So right here, I'm just going to set it here for now. Now there's also one random hit to roll on the bomber as well. And I want to go ahead and roll that on camera for you guys. So we have our chart here. We're aiming at the airframe, 1 to 10. So we're going to go ahead and roll our 1d10 and see what happens. An 8, which on our chart, an 8 means the port engine. Now we're going to go ahead, obviously, there are 2 port engines. You just roll 1d6 to determine. Let's see, 1 to 2 is the inboard port engine. So we'll go ahead and apply a damage marker to the inboard port engine. All right, now it's time for us to take some hits. Remember, they have 2 defensive fire hits. There are no reduction or addition based on any other modifiers, so we're just going to suffer 2 hits. So what we do is we look at our B6 fighter damage chart here, and we're going to go ahead and roll 2 times for 2 random hits on this chart. And it's a 1d6 plus a 1d6 to create results from 11 to 66. So we're going to use the black die first. So we have our 2d6, and we have black die first. Tell me what it is. So that's a 64, which is 64 means our forward weapons suffer damage. And then 46. 46 means our forward guns. So forward weapons and then forward guns suffer damage. All right, so I just want to double check the rules. I thought that was the case, but I just want to double check. So that would be very bad news for our damage. So if by suffering a hit to our guns, that would knock out this gun right here. And then when we had the forward weapons, that would be all forward weapons, which means we would have no weapons left, which means we'd be forced to disengage and fly away from the bomber, and it would have no chance to shoot it down. That does happen. That is part of the game. So when you're playing normally through the sorties, that's something that would happen. And so what we would do from there is we would say, oh, I mean, our guns are up. We don't have any chance, and we're not going to, kamikaze it here. So we'll go ahead and, as an interceptor versus a bomber, you can disengage at any point. So we would go ahead and just basically, instead of going into medium range, we'd go ahead and fly away. And then we would roll for landing, and then we would live to fight another day. And then our aircraft would be repaired, and eventually we'd be able to go up on another sortie. That's how it would go. That's how it would happen if you're playing normally through the campaign. I'm going to cheat a little bit again, just because I do want to show you guys the game, and I don't want it to stop there. So we're going to go ahead and say, okay, those were not hits on our weapons. Those were hits on, let's say the tail took a hit. Ooh, that's an ammo marker. The tail took a hit, and also port wing. All right. Again, just for video purposes, I want to run through a full sortie and show you guys combat against a bomber all the way through, as opposed to just, getting shot down or having to disengage immediately. So, all right, so we took care of that, which means that this first round of combat is over. We're going to go ahead and, remember, I want to adjust that guy over here. So now we know this round, he's going to have one less random hit on me. The bomber will, range, we're going to go ahead and move it to medium range. So now we're a little bit closer. Go ahead and we start a new round of combat. I'm going to fire all my forward guns again, and I am going to aim at the airframe. So remember, you say where you're going to aim. So I'm going to aim the airframe, and we're going to flip our combat card. What are we firing? Firing all my forward weapons. Let's go ahead and take away our ammo, which we lost. That forward cannon is now out of ammo. Last hit with him, and this one guy still has some left though. So we have a total of 12 again. Draw a card, look at it. For 12, it's group damage again. So you can go ahead and roll on that group damage chart. And then for the bomber, flip to their defensive. They're going to have 4 hits on me. Now the modifier, remember, there's one modifier for range, for formation, and then there's one modifier for the gunner damage they suffered in the first round. So if you look on the game board here, B-17 in formation is +1 random hit, so that 4 would become a 5. However, they do have one gunner that's hurt, so it drops back down to a 4. So it's still going to take 4 hits, which is a lot of hits. So, but let's go ahead and just roll on for them, and then we'll see what happens to us. Good news for me is, since I'm trying to teach this video and trying to teach the game, odds are I won't get shot down, no matter what. I mean, I'll kind of explain it to you guys, but you get the idea. All right, so go ahead and grab our chart here. B3, bomber and group damage chart. Remember, it's just like I talked about before. It's the airframe. 1 control hit, 1 airframe hit, 1 gunner hit, and then 2 random hits, which in this case, there was no negative modifier for range because we're at medium range, so we're going to suffer both random hits. So it'll be there. Airframe already took 1 hit first round, so it'll take another hit. Control surfaces takes another hit. The gunners, it's going to be 2. So again, what I do is kind of mnemonic, is I'm going to go ahead and set the 2 next to that 1, so that way it'll remind us. And now we're going to roll for 2 random hits on the airframe here. 1 through 10. It's a 1 and a 4. So go ahead and look on here. The 1 is the airframe suffers a hit, and 4 is random wing. So we're going to go ahead and knock the airframe down here, and then one of these wings is going to suffer a hit. It's random, so we'll just say starboard is odd. It's even, so it's going to be a port wing. There we go. Now we're going to go ahead and roll for our hits. We're suffering 4. That's a little brutal. So B6, fighter damage chart. Let's go ahead and start rolling on there. Remember our 2d6 we're going to roll. Black die goes first. That's a 1/6, so 16. GM -1 boost. The GM1 boost, sorry. GM1 boost. What happens is a hit against any system not present is minor damage, no effect. So if we roll for minor damage, or again, if it's something that I don't have on the plane, it doesn't count at all. Fortunate for us. So the first hit, basically no damage, no effect. Second one, 34. It's supposed to auto zoom. I'm sorry about that, guys. All right, the tail takes a hit. Go ahead and, I already had the tail hit from before when I made up my damage, so 1 more notch on there. 3 more damage rolls. 51. That is the tail. So what that would do, if you look down here, bottom left, you see on my aircraft mat, if I hit another on the tail, that X means my aircraft would be destroyed and I'd have to bail out. So what I'll show you is how that works, but I'm not going to stop the combat because, I'm cheat mode right now. We got cheat mode running. All right, so what that means is you'd say, oh no, aircraft is shot down. Okay, so what we do is we have a parachute chart here. B8. They got a chart for everything in this game. I love it. If you like rolling dice, you're going to love this game. So you roll a 1d6 for each crewman who bails out. Now, if you're hurt, or if you have a parachute skill, or if your aircraft is on fire, which can happen, that's going to be a modifier on your roll here. Now, we are not on fire. The tail was just destroyed. That's it. And we're not wounded. We don't have the parachute skill, though. That's okay. So we're going to roll our 1d6. Really, thankfully, because there's no negative modifiers, the worst that can happen is we'll suffer a light wound. Odds are, though, we're just going to safely parachute. Let's go ahead and roll and see what happens. All right, roll a 2. That is safely parachuted. So in game terms, what that means is, obviously, the aircraft is lost. We parachute down. We miss a sortie for us to be recovered and given back to an aircraft. So you would have, you have your little sortie log here. Try to get it on the camera here. You go ahead and, you write down, hey, shot down, 1 sortie, etc. Shot down. Mark off, one of these sorties to indicate that you're not able to use it, with a mark through it or whatever, and then go ahead down to the next one before you start rolling again. But we are in cheat mode, so no effect to us. Instead, what we're going to say is the damage is not the tail, the damage is the port wing. All right, go ahead and roll again. Dish out some more damage. I don't mind doing that. Might not actually allow ourselves to be shot down, Well, we'll take some damage. But although I want to point out, as you can see, that does show you that this game can be hard. It can be difficult. Odds are you are going to lose some planes. In fact, you will lose planes. You may not die, but you will lose planes. All right, so what did I say I got? Oh, 61. All right, forward cannons. So we'll ignore that one because we know that we do not want to lose our cannons because I need to be able to demonstrate to you guys how the game works. 24 would be oxygen. That one would be bad as well because then we'd have to disengage after this. This playthrough is getting rough here. I'm at basically full-on cheat mode. I might as well not even roll for damage to me. So as you can see, the game is quite deadly. What would happen is you'd roll your oxygen is damaged. What that means is as soon as I believe it's either the round or the pass is done, either way, I mean, I would have to double check. You then have to disengage and return to base and roll for your landing. So we're going to skip that though. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip the rest of their damage rolls if they had any, because frankly, I'm sick of rolling for stuff I'm just going to ignore anyway. Because I want to finish out the combat here so you guys can see how it works fully. So, all right. Let's go ahead and, was that the end of that? Yep, that was the end of that. Okay. What we do is we're going to move our range counter to close range. Let's go ahead and nudge this bad boy over so we know they have 2 hits to their gunners as well. All right, we'll start a new round of combat. I'm going to aim at the airframe and I'm going to fire all my forward guns. Now remember, this one is out of ammo. So that forward cannon is out of ammo, so I can only fire this one and that one, which gives me, I no longer have a 12 firepower, I now only have an 8 firepower. Let's go ahead and reduce the ammo by 1. So let's go ahead and flip with my 8 firepower. DE means they're destroyed. So DE, like I said, is destroyed result. So that's great. So we're about to shoot the bomber down. Let's see what they do to us. Because remember, combat is simultaneous. And because we're at close range, we'd have a random hit, an extra random hit, but destroyed result, you don't need any hits because you just destroyed them. Now we look at their defensive fire is 3 hits, which you want to do a couple modifiers here, as we've talked about already. So for random, they get +2 random hits because they're in close range. So their 3 becomes 5. However, they have 2 damage to their gunners, 2 wounds to their gunners, whoever you want to call it. 2 gunners are out. So they're only going to suffer the 3, or excuse me, they're only going to shoot me for 3 random hits. You go ahead and roll on the chart again. I'm not going to do that anymore because I've already basically been knocked out of the sky twice anyway. So there's no reason to keep doing that. I'm sure I'll be knocked out a 3rd time. But we have now shot down the bomber after some good cheating. And then just to point out, I noticed I forgot to write it down. So when you have your little sheet here, as soon as you roll for what it is, fighters or bombers, under aircraft targets, you would put it. So, ours is a B-17. So go ahead and put the B-17. And then what we can do is we can circle it because we shot it down. I mean, we cheated to shoot it down, but still, that's 1 kill and our first sortie. All right, let's return home. Okay, so we've shot down this bomber, theoretically, and now we're going to return home. So what we do is take our little guy here. We're going to move him along the track over to the landing box, and we're going to go ahead and roll on landing. Of course, you may have guessed, there is a chart for that. Chart B7, the landing chart. On this chart, there's modifiers, landing skill, and if your controls are hit, emergency landing. If there's wounds, the landing gear is damaged, poor engine, engine out, poor weather, bad weather, etc. We're good weather. We have, what do we have damage to? Any of the controls or anything? No, just the tail and the port wing, and then a bunch of damage that I, cheated to not have. So let's say we're just gonna go ahead and roll our 2d6, which we don't really need to roll because with no modifiers, you're guaranteed a safe landing. All right, so we landed safely. Go ahead and move our guy back over to the hangar. And there we go. We have landed. We have completed a sortie. Oh, focus. Get that focus in there. All right. Here's where we would determine our awards, prestige points, and experience points. So, sorry for bumping the camera, guys. So what we're going to do is, again, assuming we had actually shot him down and not been shot down or had to return to base ourselves, we have marked off. We circle the B-17. We have 1 kill, and this was our first sortie. So, number 1. What you're doing is you're keeping track of how many kills you get, how many sorties you're able to go on, because what happens is down here at the bottom, you're going to keep track of awards. Were you wounded in combat? Have you bought any special skills, and have you become an expert? What happens is as you earn certain awards and ranks, do you get to promote? You're going to gain extra experience points and prestige points. You can see over here up on our mat, we had 1 experience point and no prestige point to start with. You use those experience points to buy skills, and then use prestige points to either rebase different areas, upgrade your aircraft to a more powerful aircraft, etc. That is 1 complete sortie. It was just against a bomber, and obviously I had to fudge some rules and fudge some results here. Not rules, but results, just to show you guys it. So I wanted you guys to really experience a whole sortie against a bomber all the way through. Hopefully you got a good idea of how the game works. Again, you can also see how deadly it is. I really enjoy this one. I love narrative-driven style games. So whether it's, like I said, the submarine one, Silent Victory, whether it's something like Picket Duty by Steve Dixon, or Interceptor Ace by Gregory Smith, the man himself, who does so many great narrative-driven war games. So if you like to, put yourself in the role of piloting an aircraft, and you like to chuck some dice, but also don't mind flipping some cards, and you get to make some good decisions at the same time. Yeah, you're gonna kind of be flipping, like I said, flipping cards and rolling dice and seeing what happens, and there's some luck to it, absolutely. But at the same time, if you make the right decisions along the way, it's going to improve your odds, and it's just fun to develop a story. Maybe you're that pilot who, maybe Carl von Stahl is that pilot who gets shot down a lot. I don't know. Or maybe you can get through half a dozen missions, never get shot down, and you're starting to build experience points and prestige points. So either way, that was how the game works. That's how a sortie against a bomber works. There's also, when you sorties, when you do it against a fighter, I'll just show you it. We're not going to run through that right now. So let me go ahead and, if I can find it here, I'll show you how that works. So when you have against a fighter here, you can see a little chart here. You're going to have their fighter counter there and yours here. And if you ever played Down in Flames, it's kind of based on that a little bit. So it's going to be positioning, right? Are you head on? Are you disadvantaged, which means maybe one to the side, one facing? Are you at their tail, or are you being tailed? And then you're going to go ahead and engage in combat with another fighter. You're an interceptor. You're going to engage a fighter against, P-38, P-47, Spitfire, or P-51. That's tough. It's really tough, especially with my Focke-Wulf 190, because that's more of a heavy-duty aircraft that's better for fighting bombers. You usually get blown out of the sky if you got one of those guys. If you have a, who am I thinking of? What's the other aircraft? Well, I can't think of it. But anyway, there's other aircraft, BF-109. Those are much more effective dogfighting. Less effective against bombers, but much more effective dogfighting. Anyway, that's a different aspect of the game that can be covered in a different video. I want to show you guys the base game and kind of just fighting against a bomber and just seeing how it is. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a comment below. If you've never, watched some other videos, check them out. If you like what you see, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see next. I always appreciate comments. Okay, guys? All right, till next time, take care.